Silverman from the IAA, and I have a very special guest today, someone who's probably very familiar to many of you watching. Paul Sobel recently retired from Georgia Pacific down in Atlanta, Georgia, where he was most recently the Chief Risk Officer and previously the Chief Audit Executive. He's also served the IAA for many years in a number of volunteer capacities, including I actually got the opportunity to serve with Paul on the Global Board of Directors, including during his year as our Global Chairman of the Board. So very much an honor to be around Paul, and I've known him for a good number of years. And in his retirement, he has found an amazing way to continue to serve our profession, as well as that of some of our stakeholders and peers. Paul is the chairman of a little organization we refer to as the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, or COSO. So, Paul, thank you for coming in and joining me today.
My pleasure, Harold. Nice to see your face, even if we can't literally be face-to-face. And happy to be doing something that is sort of a sense of normalcy in a very abnormal world right now.
Absolutely. So I asked Paul to come on, and one of the things he's been doing recently is, if you follow him on LinkedIn, you probably would have seen this. He's been doing a number of posts that talk about how COSO frameworks can help organizations, or organizations can leverage the COSO frameworks as they move through these tumultuous times and hopefully come out of a pandemic environment and get back to the workplace. So, Paul, a question I have for you: you seem to get quite a stir going with your posts. I think the last I saw, the first post you had over 100 comments and over 450 reactions. So tell me, what was the original motivation for getting out there with some of your thoughts?
Well, part of it is I didn't want COSO to be too conspicuous by its absence. On the other hand, I also didn't want to be out there just posting things for the sake of posting. So, working with the board and our PR firm, we decided that it would be helpful to have a series of short posts over a period of time talking about how the frameworks can be useful to organizations during and coming out of the pandemic. Now, the interesting thing is that first post that you're alluding to wasn't actually one that contained any intellectual content. It was really more of just an alert telling, hey, more is coming, stay tuned. And I was flabbergasted that as of this morning, I think there's over 38,000 views, 460 impressions, which is good, and 130 some comments.
Wow.
Not all the comments are necessarily favorable to COSO, and that's okay. I think what it showed me is that there's a lot of pent-up desire to be discussing and debating risk management concepts. And my initial post simply provided a forum for that. I encourage people to go out there and just look at those comments. Some really interesting perspectives, some interesting thoughts, and a lot that can be learned. So I consider it to be a great success, even though I hadn't really started to post anything of substance yet.
We were talking the other day, and you were, I could tell you were amazed by how much interest there was out there. So, I know that there's, some of those posts are a little bit longer, and the comments are great, as you mentioned. So quickly, how do you think internal auditors and stakeholders should leverage the COSO frameworks during the pandemic and hopefully as we recover?
Yeah, so this is obviously a time where everybody's in kind of crisis mode. So it's a real challenge to just kind of do something in a structured and disciplined way. But yet, I think what we believe and are probably learning is, those COSO frameworks have components and principles that are somewhat timeless. Yes, they may need to be tweaked a little bit for the circumstances, but they still work. So, part of what I'm encouraging people to do in my ongoing posts, and I still have a few more to come, is just to kind of use those frameworks as a way to bring some structure and discipline in evaluating where are we today and where do we need to go in the future. Every organization is probably going to have to go through some change in terms of our strategies still viable, maybe even modifying the entire business model. But being able to think through those components and more so the principles and say, are these still present and functioning, or do we need to modify how we approach achieving those principles? I think is a good way for people to just kind of take what seems like a really imposing task and manage it a little bit better. Again, It's a somewhat of a structured and disciplined approach, which of course aligns very well with the internal audit definition as well.
Absolutely. So any words of advice for internal auditors as we hopefully emerge from the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I'm out of the internal audit world now officially, but still paying very close attention. So my thoughts are, I've had a lot of time to reflect, being semi-retired, and really a few things jump to mind. First of all, I mentioned that everybody's kind of been in crisis mode, and most crisis response plans really focus on kind of a single, relatively short duration event, how you deal with it, and then how you come through it after that. This has been anything but that. It's been a long duration event. It's going to be a long time coming out of it. And I think internal audits can lead, or at least participate in kind of the lessons learned process of saying, how did our crisis response plan really work? What did we just really handle well, and what did we find that maybe we weren't that well prepared for? I think probably every organization is going to go through a lessons learned process, and internal audit needs to make sure that they're an integral part of that. Now, secondly, as I mentioned before, I think many organizations are going to be reassessing their strategies. Again, possibly their entire business model, but certainly their strategies. What that means is that our stakeholders are going to have probably some very different expectations of internal audit in the coming months and maybe even years than they had in the past. So while you may think you're getting back to a sense of normalcy, that doesn't mean dusting off the old internal audit plan and restarting it. It really means kind of starting from square one, having those discussions with audit committee, executives, line management to really understand what their new expectations are, and trying to make sure that your risk-based plan addresses the risks of the new normal, whatever that new normal actually is. So again, it's kind of a common sense, obvious thing, but I think it'll be so easy for internal auditors to kind of take a deep breath and say, we're back to normal. Now let's get back on with our internal audit plan. And that's probably not going to really serve you very well long term. And the third thing that kind of comes to mind for me is during these times, I suspect every internal audit function has had to make some dramatic changes, whether it's just the work arrangements, probably greater use of technology, maybe more of an agile type approach. And we're learning a lot during that. And I think the key is now as you look forward, try to accelerate that even more. There's a lot of positives that have kind of been forced on us over these last several months. And it's not a time to just say, okay, let's remember that, but go back to the way we used to audit. We're going to see new audit approaches, and I think new opportunities for internal audit to be more effective and more efficient in the future. So leverage what you've learned during these times. And again, in some cases, maybe accelerate those learnings.
Yeah, I think one of the messages that we've seen or has emerged from the research that we've done is that every internal audit function, every organization has been impacted. Those that will thrive in the future are those that have taken this really horrific events and learned something from it that they can take forward, whether it be greater use of automation, ability to do work remotely. Not that it's necessarily ideal. There's still a very human component, but leveraging automation, being more efficient, and we'll see how those emerge. So, Paul, I appreciate you coming to share those thoughts. Before we sign off, I'd be curious if you could share how COSO continues to operate during these unusual times. And aside from your posts, is there anything that we should be seeing coming down the road from COSO?
Yeah, so we had a series of guidance projects underway, and one that I think is of particular interest. In early March, the authors reached out to me and said, should we take a break on this? So much is going on in the world. Do you want to hold off and wait until after, post-pandemic to issue the guidance? And I said, no, I think the guidance is even more relevant now than it might have been pre-pandemic. So we are continuing to push forward with guidance. In fact, we've just issued some new guidance relating to risk appetite. It's called Risk Appetite Critical to Success. And I think it's going to be very, very important guidance, particularly as organizations start to rethink their strategies, because risk appetite, frankly, is more about strategic planning than it is true risk management. It's really back at the strategy setting time. So I think the guidance is going to be quite helpful. It's got some really good examples in there. As I say, just issued free on the COSO website. We will have some guidance on blockchain coming out in another month and a half. That'll focus more on internal controls over financial reporting. It's such a broad topic that's still kind of being created, so we narrowed it a little bit, but I think people will find that interesting. Then later in the summer, we'll have guidance about applying risk management for a compliance and ethics program. During times like this, compliance and ethics are still critically important, and you want to make sure that you don't let that slip. And I think that guidance later this summer will be quite helpful.
Well, thank you, Paul, and on behalf of the IA, thank you to COSO for continuing to serve us as one of the sponsoring organizations and our members as your stakeholders. And Paul, and also thank you for coming in and joining me today. And it's always been a pleasure to serve with you in our capacities of the IA, and as someone who can always bounce ideas off of and get your perspectives. They're very much valued. And I hope everybody who's joined today has appreciated the opportunity to hear Paul's thoughts. Thank you for listening to us, and we very much look forward to the opportunity to see everybody when we can face to face, and we hope everybody stays safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.